A cargo door. Steel curved about the size of a garage door set into the belly of a wide-body jet. It is latched. A ground handler has already pushed the outer handle closed and walked away. Nothing looks wrong. 12 minutes later, the aeroplane is climbing over Windsor, Ontario, and that door is gone, ripped clean off the fuselage. The cabin floor above it buckles downward. Cables run through that floor. Hold on that image, because the strange part is not that it happened. The strange part is that somebody had already written down exactly how it would happen. By the end of this, you will understand something specific. Not that a plane crashed. That a latch can be built so it feels locked when it is not, and that the difference between the two states was a matter of one small pin, one thin rod, and a handle a person could force with their own arm. You will be able to picture the mechanism. You will also see the memo. Real document, real author, real date, still quoted in aviation courses today. And you will see what happened to it after it was written, which is the part of this file that people argue about. The folk version of this story is straightforward, and most people who tell it are not being unfair. It goes, an aeroplane door was badly designed. An engineer warned about it, management ignored him to protect the schedule, and people died. Villains and a hero. That version survives because the bones of it are true, and it fits how we like stories shaped. But it flattens the interesting part. A door that simply fails is an engineering problem. A door that reports back that it is safe when it is not is a different animal entirely. That is the thing worth looking at. Start with the record, in order. The DC-10 was McDonnell Douglas's wide-body, 3 engines, entering airline service in 1971. Its cargo doors opened outward, hinged at the top, and that choice matters. An outward opening door has no wedge effect from cabin pressure holding it shut. Pressure pushes it out, so the latches carry the entire load. On this door, 4 hooks rotated over spools on the door frame. When they were fully over, the door was sound. When they were not quite over, the door could still be pulled shut and look shut. That gap is the whole case. Now the paper trail begins before the aeroplane ever carried a passenger. On May 29, 1970, during ground pressurization testing of DC-10 fuselage number 1, a cargo door failed. The congressional record on this case describes it as the forward cargo door on that test article. So the failure mode was seen in 1970, on the ground, under controlled conditions, by the people building the aircraft. Design changes followed. The question the rest of this file answers is whether those changes fixed the mechanism or only the symptom, because the mechanism showed up again 2 years later, at altitude. June 12, 1972. American Airlines Flight 96, a DC-10, leaves Detroit for Buffalo. Climbing through roughly 11,750 feet, the rear cargo door separates from the aircraft. Explosive decompression. The cabin floor above the hold collapses downward and takes control cables with it. The crew loses part of their control authority. They fly the aeroplane back to Detroit and land it. Everyone aboard survives. Read that again, because it is the reason this file exists. The failure did happen in service with witnesses, investigators, and wreckage, and nobody died. A complete demonstration, delivered free. So what did investigators find in the door? Not fatigue. Not a manufacturing defect that had crept in. They found a latching system that could be left in an unsafe position and then closed over by force. The electric actuator drove the latch hooks. A separate set of locking pins was supposed to slide in behind the hooks and hold them. If the hooks had not traveled far enough, the pins jammed against them. and the outer handle, the one a ground handler pulls down, was linked to those pins by a thin torque tube, which brings the next piece to the board. That torque tube could deform. Enough force on the exterior handle, and the handle would come down flush. The vent door in it would close, and the linkage would give rather than the latches moving into place. From outside, a door in that condition presented as secured, handle down, vent closed, nothing protruding. The one signal available to the person closing it was a signal that could be produced by brute force alone, not fraud, not carelessness, just a design where the confirmation and the condition it confirmed were not rigidly connected. 6 weeks after Windsor, the most quoted document in this case is typed. Dan Applegate was Director of Product Engineering at Convair, the subcontractor that built the DC-10 fuselage. His memo, dated June 27, 1972, is addressed up his own management chain, not to McDonnell Douglas. In it, he sets out the cargo door problem and the floor collapse consequence, and he argues the fundamental failure mode has not been corrected. Sources reproduce and paraphrase it widely. Its substance is not in dispute. What is disputed is what any single line of it says word for word, so I'm not going to quote it. The memo did not travel. Convair's own management reasoning, as recorded in later inquiries, involved contractual exposure. Convair was a subcontractor. Raising a design objection formally to McDonnell Douglas after delivery risked Convair being held liable for correction costs. That is the documented shape of the decision. Not a conspiracy. A commercial calculation inside a supplier about who pays. The engineering concern stayed inside one company's filing system. The aeroplanes kept flying. And the fix that was applied to the fleet is the next thing to go on the board, because it is the hinge of the whole case. After Windsor, the response was a service bulletin wrote rather than an airworthiness directive. Modifications were made. Support plates for the locking pins, a small viewing window so a handler could look in and check the latch position, and placards limiting the force to be applied to the handle. Read that list again. A window to look through. A sticker about how hard to pull. Those are procedural guards bolted onto a mechanism that could still reach a false secure state. They shift the burden of safety from the structure to the person at the door on the night shift. March 3, 1974. Turkish Airlines Flight 981, a DC-10, departs Paris-Orly. The rear cargo door fails after takeoff. Decompression, cabin floor collapse, control loss. The aircraft came down in the Ermenonville forest. All 346 people aboard were killed, which at the time was the deadliest single aircraft accident in history. The investigation traced the door on that specific airframe and its modification status, and the failure sequence matched the one seen over Windsor 21 months earlier. Same door, same floor, same cables. A second demonstration of a mechanism that had already been demonstrated once and written down. Here is the mechanism, laid out so you can follow it yourself. An outward opening door means pressure fights the latches instead of helping them. The latches were driven by an actuator whose travel could stop short. The locking pins that should have blocked a bad latch could instead jam against it. The handle that reported the state was joined to those pins by a member that could bend before the latches moved. So the report and the reality could separate. Then, above the hold, a passenger floor strong enough for people but not for a sudden pressure difference, with flight control cables running through it. Stack those, and you get a system with no single point of resistance. The door can be wrong. The indication can be wrong in the same direction, and the consequence of the door being wrong is not a hole in the belly, It is degraded control of the aircraft. Any one of those three alone is survivable and unremarkable. Together they form a chain where the first error is invisible and the last one is unrecoverable. That is not misfortune. That is a design in which the failure path was shorter and easier than the safe path. So why does this read like bad luck? Because of the thousands of times it didn't. Every DC-10 cargo door closed correctly on every other flight, and every one of those flights confirmed to everybody involved that the procedure worked. The successes are silent. Only the failure speaks. And a mechanism that needs a specific combination, a short latch travel plus enough force on the handle, will look random from outside, because the conditions that produce it are invisible from outside. If this kind of paper trail is your thing, subscribe. The files are all like this once you get past the story people tell. Now the honest part, because this case is not tidy. The exact wording of the Applegate memo is reproduced differently across books, articles, and course notes, so treat any single quoted sentence with caution. Accounts also differ on how much McDonnell Douglas knew of Convair's internal concerns and when. And the regulatory sequence after Windsor, why a service bulletin rather than a mandatory directive, has been argued over for decades by investigators, authors, and the parties themselves. The record establishes the mechanism and the dates. It does not settle every question of who understood what. What the record does settle is narrower and, I think, more useful. A failure mode appeared on a test fuselage in 1970. It appeared again in flight in 1972, with the aircraft recovered and everyone aboard alive. An engineer inside the supply chain wrote it up in a memo dated June 27, 1972. The fix that reached the fleet asked a human being to look through a window and not pull too hard. In 1974, the same mode killed 346 people. Every link in that chain is dated and documented. None of it required anyone to be unlucky. Murphy's Law is not a complaint about fate. Murphy and the engineers around him were making a design rule out of it. If a part can be assembled the wrong way, someone will assemble it that way, so build it so it cannot be. The DC-10 door is that rule stated in the negative. It could be closed wrong. It could then say it was closed right. That was allowed. Next file, an instrument that measured perfectly and still gave the wrong answer because two teams never agreed on what the number meant.